In today's video, we're going to be checking out Arizona's $1,000,000 highway. It's a stretch of highway that's been abandoned since the 1950s. Now in just a couple seconds here, I'm going to drive back down the highway and hike back up, and I'm going to show you guys some pretty cool things along the way and tell you a little bit about the history. Let's go. Now this abandoned stretch of highway that we'll be trekking on today sits just east of the little mining town known as Superior, Arizona. And if you're not familiar with Superior, Arizona, it's located about 1 hour east of Phoenix. Now this little town has some of the most breathtaking views in the entire state, and the highway that we'll be exploring runs right through the heart of this canyon. Now back in the early 1900s, there really wasn't a direct route connecting Superior, Arizona to the nearby mining towns of Miami and Globe. So in comparison to today's modern US Highway 60, it's just a short 30-minute drive from Superior to Globe. But back in the day, if you wanted to travel from Superior to Globe, you had to head back west and then hop on the rugged Apache Trail and follow it all along the Salt River, then back down to the Globe, Miami, and Claypool area. A commute like this was extremely time-consuming, exhausting, and rather dangerous. This called for a more efficient means of travel, which eventually led to the construction of US Highway 60, which opened in April of 1922. And this, my friends, is where we start our journey. The old highway begins here, and it's just over a 2-mile hike to the top. This segment of Highway 60 became abandoned after the new highway and tunnel was constructed in the early 1950s, and we'll come back to this in just a moment. Nowadays, it serves as a hiking trail, and you can still hike the very same path that travelers once took when the original highway was in use. Here's a quick Google Earth view of the old highway. If you do plan on hiking this, keep these two things in mind. 1, it's a round trip of 4.5 miles, and 2, it's a 700-foot gain in elevation, so if you're not in shape and you can't climb a flight of stairs, maybe sit this one out. Once you get started on the trail, you don't have to go too far before you start seeing remnants of the past. On one side of the trail, you will see many brick and stone structures. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information or pictures on the web of what they were. Now on the other side of the trail, across from Queen Creek, you can see a mine entry point, which has been sealed off. And there's even a few more of these further up the trail too. There's even an old ore bin. This is where product was picked up and shipped to where it would eventually be processed. A little over half a mile hike into the old highway, we eventually come to one of the most prominent features, and this is the old Queen Creek Bridge. This was built between 1920 and 1921, making it over 100 years old. And it's pretty impressive that it still stands today, given the amount of traffic that it's endured over the years. It was even a real treat to see water flowing beneath it in Queen Creek. Let it be said that Queen Creek is dry most of the year, but after a good downpour, the creek comes to life, and the sounds of water rushing through the canyon in and around the rocks makes it that much more enjoyable. And if you do enough exploring in the area further up the road, you will be able to see a pretty amazing waterfall. Now when water starts flowing through the creek here, it does not last long, so get there while you can. Another couple-minute walk up the trail, and you will soon feast your eyes on the more recent Queen Creek Bridge. This bridge was built in 1949 and has a total length of 576 feet, and of course it is a part of the new Highway 60. Fun fact about this bridge, it will not be around too much longer. Now, according to az.gov, a new Queen Creek Bridge will be constructed just to the east of the existing bridge. The existing steel bridge will remain in place and be fenced off following construction of the new bridge. The Waterfall Canyon Bridge, located east of the Queen Creek Tunnel, will be reconstructed in its existing location. Waterfall Canyon Bridge is the bridge that you're seeing right now, and I hope the construction of the new bridge does not impact the surrounding landscapes, because this is just too beautiful of an area to risk destruction. Now with the original highway, construction began in 1919 and was later completed in 1922. It was nicknamed the $1,000,000 Highway due to the intense labor costs. It's also been referred to as Convict Highway, and according to a plaque I found along the trail, as a cost-saving measure, convict labor was used to complete some of the project's toughest jobs, like constructing the old Claypool Tunnel, and we're going to tour the old Claypool Tunnel here in just a minute. Now that same plaque also stated that there was a rock further up on the trail that had some carvings on it, and those carvings are believed to be the identification numbers from some of the inmates that worked on the highway. And sure enough, after a hop, skip, and a jump, I eventually found that same rock. The carvings are still there, but compared to the photo showcased on the plaque, the carvings have definitely lost a little bit of detail and definition,
which is expected. I mean, after all, they've been exposed to the elements of the desert for over 100 years. And if you look closely at the left-hand side of the rock, you can also see more faded etchings of the identification numbers. And here's a photo of the plaque, giving a brief summary of the old highway's history. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this video moving along, but if you do want to read this plaque in its entirety, feel free to pause the video.
Now, back in the Wild West days, they always said you had to be tough as iron in order to live in parts like these, and I can definitely see why. It's mid-February right now, and the temp is around 58, 59 degrees. It was a lot cooler when I started hiking this morning, but once that sun poked out, it definitely warmed up quite a bit. It always makes me wonder how tough it was to come through this area via horse and buggy or just to walk it back in the early 1900s, especially in the summer months. I mean, when this highway was built, that was when the automobile was first being introduced. So if you were lucky enough to have an automobile, good for you. But if not, you either had to do horse and buggy or walk this highway.
Now, as I continued up the trail and looked over the edge, I remembered from my research that this was in fact a 2-lane highway. Now, walking up and down this thing wasn't so bad, but to imagine 2 lanes of traffic occupying the road at once still blows my mind. Mainly because there was very little shoulder room, and not to mention, there really isn't much for guardrails. And the few guardrails that are there, they're not even meant to keep your car from going off the edge. Their main purpose is to act as a retaining wall to keep the road from falling apart. And in fact, further up the trail on the other side of the Claypool Tunnel, I was able to make out a few car wrecks at the bottom of the canyon. You definitely had to have a lot of courage to travel this road. Heck, even today, just walking on the path can be dangerous. Some parts of the trail aren't too bad, while other parts are pretty tore up. One wrong move could send you tumbling down to the bottom. And to make matters even worse, you also had to keep a sharp eye out for any fallen rocks. I was amazed to see the numerous amount of boulders that had crashed down onto the trail. And it's not just the old highway. Every once in a while, they will shut down the new highway for any recent fallen rocks, typically after a hard rain, or when they need to do controlled blasting to get rid of any potential boulders, causing a threat to traffic below. Even on the new highway today, some travelers still find themselves in the most unfortunate circumstances.
You got it, buddy. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
And as I made my way closer to the Claypool Tunnel, I found little patches of the faded white center line still on the highway. Being that the old highway became abandoned after the new one was complete in the 1950s, I think it's safe to say this center line has been here since the 40s. And if you do enough research on this place, you can find a lot of little Easter eggs, such as these mines toward the top of the canyon that have been closed off.
All right, we finally made it to the tunnel. Cannot wait to go in here because the temperature is going to drop by at least 10 degrees. So much cooler. Check that out. Back in the day, they just blasted right through this. You can see little water spots on the ground where water just drips through the cracks. Now, there was one thing in particular in this tunnel that I wanted to share with you guys because I've done so much research on this old highway, and there is one thing that still blows my mind. Oh, here it is. Take a look at that. These cylinder-shaped carvings in the rock here. I still have yet to figure out what they were for.
Now that was the old tunnel that was built back in the early 1920s. We're going to check out the new tunnel in just a moment, but I wanted to show you guys some before and after photos here, just to kind of give you some comparison. Now, the old highway ran its course for the better part of 30 years, but as time moved on, a more efficient and, by God, a more safer route was needed. And according to az.gov, in 1952, the 1,200-foot long Queen Creek Tunnel had finally opened, replacing the Claypool Tunnel. Now, in comparison to the old Claypool Tunnel, the new tunnel was well funded, making it safer, smoother, and well lit for better visibility. The new tunnel really hasn't changed over the years, and it always makes the drive in and out of Superior more enjoyable. According to www.routeu.com, the tunnel is 1,217 feet long. It has a height of 22 feet and is 42 feet wide at its base. And at the time of construction, it cost $550,000, and it was built by Fisher Contracting Company. The old highway is just a small part of the 21 stretch of highway that connects Superior to the Globe, Miami, and Claypool area. And as you're leaving Superior and coming out of Queen Creek Tunnel, you really get some astonishing views of the tall rock spires on both sides of the road. It kind of gives you a better perspective on how much blood, sweat, and tears went into paving the new way to get to Globe. Now, another major accomplishment on US 60 is the Pinto Bridge. This is located 7 miles east of the Queen Creek Tunnel. Now, this bridge didn't always exist. Let me show you the original route. The red signifies the original stretch of highway, and the blue represents the new highway. The old highway really sent you through some winding roads, going up and going down, and facing some steep drop-offs. And again, this was very time-consuming and quite treacherous. And then in 1949, the Pinto Bridge was finally built, creating a more reliable, efficient, and safer route to Globe, Arizona. Now, the photo you see right here is the original bridge. However, due to no longer meeting modern highway safety guidelines, it was eventually demolished, and the new Pinto Bridge was completed in 2022 at a cost of only $25.3 million.